high school friends can have this. And then I'll share my screen and we'll get going. All right, so this is the agenda that you should have all had, and the slide deck, I always give people access to that because sometimes it's easier to go back and look at resources in there. But I'm going to go ahead and jump over there, and everything that's on my agenda is also on my slide deck. I like to put it in both places. So I'm Janelle McLaughlin. I actually am coming to you from North Manchester. So this is the closest to home I have ever worked since becoming a consultant. And you wouldn't know it. We could be across the country and it would be the same. So anyway, I'm happy to be working with you guys. And we're going to have the next couple months together. There's all of my contact information you could possibly want. But my quick background is that I was a classroom teacher for 14 years. And then I was Manchester's curriculum director for 3 years. You guys know how small Manchester is. So curriculum director actually meant also high ability coordinator, one-to-one implementation steer person. There were so many different RTI coordinator, you know, like everything that all those extra jobs on your job description, that was me as well. And for the last 6 years, then I've been a full-time consultant. Pre-COVID, I traveled at least 50% of the time all over the United States. So like I said, I was excited to see Huntington's name come up on our job project management board. And I jumped right on that because I feel like we're neighbors. So happy to be here and I'm excited to get going on the work that we have. So I am recording it. I don't do anything with that other than share it with your district. I always think it's important that we start off time together with norms, just like you would do with students in a classroom. And these are just norms that will help us to be successful in our time together. And these are just kind of like the short list of ones that I think encompass most things. But to be present, I know it's easy to get distracted, especially when we're meeting before school because your minds are already going to the day ahead, I'm sure. Listen actively, collaborate with ideas, take risks, be honest and kind, be critical, but don't criticize, and be vulnerable. Are there any on that list that you think shouldn't be there or things that you think we should add? Are there any that you think will be more difficult to do than others? Some like one that you are going to have to focus on more?
I'll call myself out. When you said listen actively, I actually started paying attention. I was reading an email.
So easy to do. You're right, Tom. And that's easy to do when we're face to face, but it's so much easier to get distracted when we're virtual because we have easy access to everything else. So I appreciate that. And I promise to not go over the 8 o'clock time so that you can get to all of that stuff that's just as important. And I am also glad, I didn't say this before, but I appreciate how Tom just unmuted and talked. When we're in a small group, I would rather that than you put anything in the chat, just because it's easier to have that communication and discussion going and harder for me to monitor the chat when I'm also talking. So we're going to check in. We're going to do something called a check-in protocol or a check-in word to check into the space. And this is a really cool thing, I think, to do in the classroom as well. Just hearing Lynn say, hey, we had this ACEs and SEL meeting come up. And I know SEL is something that has been brought to the forefront in the last few years, but I think this is important for adults and kids both. So it's important to know that most of the time we don't know how kids are checking into our rooms, especially if we're in a virtual setting, because you can't read those nonverbals. But giving a space that's safe for people to be honest. Like yesterday, I was in Zooms for 6 hours, and my co-leader started everything with a check-in word, and I honestly said I'm checking in exhausted. Like daylight saving time is still messing up my system. So I was checking in tired yesterday, and like Tom, I had to really focus on being intentional at being present and listening attentively. So how are you checking in this morning? And if you would say your first name, what you teach, and then your check-in word. So like for me, I'm Janelle. I get to be your consultant and coach. for the next couple of months. And I'm actually checking in bright-eyed and awake and excited this morning. So I'm going to pass it to Lynn, and then Lynn, after you check in, if you pass it to somebody else, we'll just keep it going that way.
Right. So I'm Lynn Brown, and I am the high school PD coordinator, and I am checking in with a lot of things on my agenda today. So I'm going to try really hard to focus on one thing at a time today. And I'm going to choose Andy because she's right below me. Hi, Andy. Andy, honey, you got on mute.
Thank you. It's not like I don't do virtual every day. I should have known that. I'm Andy Helms. I teach 6th grade science in class, virtual, and 8th grade English remedial, and social studies. So I'm just checking in, going with the flow, because I didn't know what I was doing this morning, because everybody's kind of doing different things in this building. I went, oh, there's right. Deb had this meeting. Let's try this out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just going to go with the flow.
Glad that you're here. Who do you want to pass it to?
Oh, Deb.
Okay, I'm checking in today and I'm not doing very well. I'm at home. I have a horrible neck pain and I'm going to the doctor today and I can barely move and I'm miserable. Yeah, I hate to be so negative, but I'm holding my neck up just so I can talk right now and I just want to cry. So that's where I'm at.
Deb, that sounds miserable, and I appreciate you being here when you're in so much pain. I hope that you find some good, easy answers at the doctor. What do you teach, Deb?
I've been a science teacher for over 20 years. Now I'm professional development for the middle schools.
Okay, awesome. And Tom.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Gross. I teach 8th grade math at Crestview Middle School in Huntington, and I'm ready to learn. That's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, let's get going then. So I'm going to start us off with a video by Ted Dintersmith. Have you guys ever heard of him? He is an educator, but he also has produced movies, written books, done all kinds of crazy stuff. But at the beginning of the pandemic, as he was hearing all of these different people in the media, really not educators, but more, and let's be real, probably some educators, but mostly people in the media talking about just this being the lost year in education and really focusing on the negatives that the pandemic was producing. He wanted to get the focus back on the positives. So we're going to watch this short video that he created called Why Not Now? And I really want you to think about these 3 things. It's called the 3 A's protocol. And a lot of things that I do in our time together will be things that you can carry over into your classroom. So if you've not heard of the 3 A's protocol, I use it for articles that people read, videos that they watch, anything that they're trying to glean some information from. And you're going to be looking for something you agree with, something you argue with, and something you aspire to. And you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going with like Andy. She's like, I do this all the time. You would think I would know. I do this all the time and I forget to share my sound when I first share my screen. So let me go back into that now.
It is arguably the hardest time in the history of education, the hardest time in the history of our country. And so I know you're dealing with just remarkably large, often daunting challenges. But I just want to say, I think parents, I think people broadly have a newfound recognition for the role that educators play in the lives of their kids and also the future of their communities. And I just want to really say from the bottom of my heart how grateful I am to you for all you're doing, because it just sets a tone for what our country's capable of when you see that kind of passion and dedication and commitment. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think I've picked up from you over the period of time I've been immersing myself in this world of education. And I still don't view myself, by the way, as any form of expert. I feel like I'm a plagiarist, right? I just listen and learn from you guys and then try to say back the things that you're doing that make so much sense. But as many of you know, we have developed this resource we call the Innovation Playlist, which was based on 5 big ideas. And those 5 big ideas were the things that when those were in place, teachers, schools, districts could make enormous progress, even states. First, I think it's indispensable to bring a community together, to recognize, to see, to appreciate a different vision of education, and to get excited about it. If your community's behind you, you can do amazing things. And then when you look at the way kids learn, the places that I think we're making incredible progress, in normal times, were the places where students had real voice in their learning, where the learning was connected to the real world, where students could see why it's real, and then where you were trusted to develop more authentic assessments, where you assess student work on the basis of evidence of mastery and real accomplishment instead of bubble test. And then the final big idea, the 5th big idea, was to make sure every kid felt like they were part of a caring and connected community. What has been so interesting, right, is as I check back with the places we filmed and the places I've written about, the people I've interviewed and talked about and brought to life, I've asked them, how did the spring go? How has this fall gone? And they said, no doubt we're in a world of challenge. No doubt the inequities that have run through our system and differentially impacted young kids in ways that I think should be off the table in terms of acceptability in our country. All those inequities have been magnified. But places that had those 5 big ideas in place shared with me again and again, there was no drop off in learning. A kid who can manage their own learning, can pick what they're interested in, can draw on resources around them, can create and carry out bold initiatives. That kid can do it whether they're in school or out of school. Teachers that reimagine their role as being guiding and inspiring their kids instead of instructing them report it was actually, I could pop in, I could do informal, office hour sessions, I could answer questions, I could give encouragement. So there was really no diminution in learning during this bollock stuff time, despite a lot of other challenges. The thing I really want to focus on is we're all exposed to the national narrative, right? If we don't get our kids quickly back to normal school, a whole generation is at risk. And to that I say, normal school is not the solution. Normal school is the problem. Normal school is what was putting an entire generation of kids at risk. If we continue to do things in school that value kids for their ability to retrieve content, replicate low-level procedures, and follow instructions, we're pushing out a generation of kids that are good at exactly what computers do perfectly. And so here's what I worry about, but here's what I'm optimistic about. I worry if we just try to port a failed model, a model that didn't work that well in person, put it on Zoom, sort of make the sense that this will be a lost year come to reality, because we all sort of throw up our hands and know that's ineffective. If that's what we do, if that's what we make it this year, we will, to use something from Hamilton, we will have missed our shot. This is our moment. Nobody can make heads or tails of these state mandated exams. They weren't given last spring, so those tests aren't going to mean anything. Nobody's looking over your shoulder to see where you are in standardized curriculum. Colleges are dropping the ACT and SAT, like there's no tomorrow. Those tests are on their way out. And all of those built-in patterns of behavior and expectations that school should be the way it's always been, they're off the table. So the door is wide open. And if we just sort of step back and say, now's the time for us to move forward with the kind of school we've always wanted to have, instead of the kind of school we inherited. We know how to do this. We can draw on our successes and strengths. I think this year will be a year we look back on and say, this was not the lost year, this was the found year. And we have unleashed so much potential among our students and our teachers, potential that normal school all too often squanders. And we could set the stage for remarkable learning year in and year out for years to come. And so again, enormous gratitude, respect, and appreciation for what you're doing. And together, I think we can show the world just what's possible.
So I saw some notes being taken as you guys were listening and watching. I want you to think now about those 3 A's, what you agree, argue, and aspire to. And when I set this up, we were going to do breakout rooms, but that was because I thought we were going to have a lot more people. So instead of breaking up, we're going to all do this in the same Jamboard. If you've not used Jamboard before, it's pretty simple and I'll show you how to use it, but it's linked in several different places. So if you have the slide deck open, you can just click on the image and there it's open. It's open in the notes. It's also linked right here in the agenda. So if you'll go ahead and open up the Jamboard, and there are 4 different frames. We're only going to use the first frame because we're all going to put our answers in the same one. If you're familiar with Padlet and not Jamboard, it's similar in the fact that you're going to get these little sticky notes. And when you click on one, then you can start typing. And then once you click save, then it goes ahead and it automatically puts it there. So you can just go ahead and move it to whichever column you want. Anybody having trouble getting the Jamboard to open? Awesome. So let's just take a few minutes and you can add your thoughts. You can have as many in each column as you would like to put.
Okay, this is Andy. What do I grab to write something?
So right over in my left-hand column, if you can see where my little finger is.
I'm on a different screen. Okay, wait a minute, back.
Okay. So on the Jamboard, this little sticky note.
Okay, thank you.
There are text boxes too. The sticky notes just work better. So I'm going to make this one bigger. You can also resize these. So if you've got a lot of text and you want to be able to read it better. And I like how somebody found the pen tool. Awesome. I'm excited to see how many of you said something about PBL too. I'm a huge PBL fan, so obviously that's something that you guys appreciate at Huntington as well. Anything that you don't agree with that somebody put in one of these columns?
I wouldn't say I disagree, but I think there's a way to do PBL virtually. The difficulty is, I think if kids have not had the experience in person, sometimes that jump is even harder because it's a hard jump for kids the first time they do PBL, even when you're live walking them through. And so then when you add the virtual piece to it, it becomes harder. But things that have been modeled with Kim and yourself, like breakout rooms and those kind of things live during the class session, I think helps a ton.
Yeah, you're right. Anytime this is my opinion, but anytime we are giving students more empowerment over their own learning, we've got to scaffold that, especially if it hasn't been in place in previous years. And with you all being secondary teachers, you're going to have to do more scaffolding than elementary teachers because they've had more years of normal school. And so definitely PBL is so student driven in nature that we've got to make sure that we're putting a lot of those supports in place. So implementing it, the very first one especially may be almost like a mini PBL. You wouldn't have all the components of it. And then you just continue to increase their control. I don't know if that's the right word, because I think even in a student-driven classroom, there's a lot of teacher control in the background, but you're giving them more freedom. That's probably a better way of saying it.
The way I've been describing it is PBL light to start with, because you probably don't get all the way to true authentic audience potentially, and the kids may not have quite as much control over their final product and their research along the way, right? But you're building the capacity to get to PBL.
Awesome. Totally agree. Anybody else have thoughts on that or one of the other posts that's on here?
Yeah, I'm the one that put hard to give virtual students the freedom to do PBL because I'm doing it right now. But to be fair, it's also hard to give virtual students the freedom to actually do their traditional stuff and him actually do it too. Mm-hmm. So I think the same students who wouldn't do very well with PBL on virtual are the same students who won't do the traditional either on virtual. So I don't really think, I think when I'm doing traditional with the virtual students, if their camera's on, I at least know they're might be hearing something. Mm-hmm. But with PBL and you give them the freedom, I mean, I know a few times I've had students on there and their picture, you can't always leave their picture up because of internet access. Mm-hmm. Our internet's not that great, so I always have to tell them to turn it off, just so that they can hear me. But to give them a PBL, some of the kids, I know they're going to do it. They're going to do a great job with it. And they're going to learn way above and beyond. That's why I still do it. Mm-hmm. Because I know the kids who aren't going to do it aren't going to listen to me during traditional anyway. So when I put that, it's more of, I don't know. It's a problem on either side, but I still would do it because the ones who are doing it are learning so much from it.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely valid, Andy. And even when I first read it, that was exactly what my thoughts went to. Well, those students are going to take liberties probably with any kind of work because that self-drive, that self-motivation hasn't been established for them.
Exactly, yeah.
And there may not be anybody holding them accountable at home. And when you're coming through a computer screen, it's really hard for you as a teacher to hold anybody accountable as well.
Right. So I'm arguing with myself on that too.
Get it.
I would just say, Andy, I appreciate anybody that's willing to take the risk to do PBL with their kids. Being the math teacher, I am on such a regimented curriculum and content load almost on a daily basis for me to vary very much from just getting through the information. It's difficult. So I think it gives kids a real break to have some classes where they can just be creative. And so it's worth it.
That's good to hear because I think of it the same way because I honestly think because I know you teach math, I know you guys have to do it. If they don't get step one, they're going to fail miserably at step 4. And so a lot of my logic with the PBL is so that they can go to math class and they've already had a time away from the computers and away from the paperwork and get ready to go back to math and be able to listen. So yeah, that's exactly what I do think when I think that. So I'm glad you acknowledged that for me. So we are working together.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
I want to shift our thinking just for a few minutes, and I'm going to change the background on here to just plain. And I'm going to ask you, you guys can add notes or you can verbalize them and I'll add it. But what are things that have changed because of COVID that you want to make sure you keep? So instead of going back to normal school, like Ted mentioned in the video, what are things that have been positive outcomes from this? And you, like I said, you can add them to the second frame on the Jamboard, or I can take those notes for you.
I definitely say the freedoms to be able to do a little bit different. Because before I was on such a regiment that I had to do this, I had to do that. And now we've had to get creative. And by doing the last March, when we were doing more of, we had to do the virtual, it gave me more ideas of, hey, I'm sick and tired of giving them an assignment where they just have to write something back. Let's give them a project to do so they can actually work on something. And I saw how well that worked. Plus the PBL class I took with Lynn last year, I absolutely loved, had an amazing time doing that. Just putting that all together really kind of grew my ability to be able to respect and understand the benefits of PBL even more than what I did before.
Awesome.
I hope that made sense.
I think so. And here, I went ahead and put it into two, but tell me if I captured your thoughts well enough in those two things.
Yes, and I was trying new things with my students. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
I also feel a little guilty when I do PBL when like those administration walks in still. I still feel guilty, like they think we're playing and we're not really doing what we're supposed to be doing. And it's really hard for me I do it anyway, but I still hope.
Your administrator is a huge fan of all things PBL, so I would not worry about that one bit.
Okay, good.
Huge supporter of the process and would be a brilliant critical friend for you if you're ever in a PBL and you're like, I need somebody to help me think through the process. We are blessed that both of the middle school principals are just over the moon about all things PBL.
Okay, good.
And are not judgmental when it's messy because they get it. Like they understand the process.
I'd like to thank the virtual. Oh, that's me. My computer's acting up.
You want to throw it in the chat, Deb, and maybe somebody can read it for me? Or if it's easier, you can feel free to put your own sticky notes on here.
Aiden Dolphins, please report to the office. Aiden Dolphins, please report to the office.
So one thing that has happened with some teachers here are there's some best practices that we could put off prior to COVID. For example, this is a super simplistic one, but creating a recording of working a math problem so that when kids aren't physically in your classroom and they're trying to review, they're not just Googling and finding any random person that's teaching them that process. We had the hardest time helping them connect that concept. And then when they had to do it during COVID, they saw the power of it. And so, and we've had to do a lot of it with all the kids in quarantine, but they're all doing it now, like every single day. And some other teachers are doing the same thing with, you know, their mini lectures or those pieces, because they're realizing that even if I'm in class and I'm truly trying to attend, it doesn't mean everything's sticking with me. And when I go home to either reflect and review or to do a little bit of homework, I need that second piece. And it's so much better when it's your teacher as opposed to some random, I've just looked it up and there's some 16-year-old that's kind of cute that's teaching me and isn't teaching me correctly. So that little pieces like that, there's just a lot of them that we probably knew better, but didn't have to do it or didn't feel like we had to do it. And COVID's forced us to do those things.
Can you hear me now? Oh, shoot. Sorry.
I'd say another piece is that PBL mindset, even if we're not all the way there, maybe it's just a little more inquiry mindset of putting more work and more effort on the actual learner as opposed to owning it all as the instructor, was just necessary when kids were not physically in the building all the time. And that's a piece that some teachers regain their ability to develop really good inquiry. Some teachers learned how to do it over this last little piece. I think almost everybody stretched themselves in that process because, as Andy said, in a typical e-learning day, you might be able to throw out a worksheet because it's a one-day event, right? But when we went from March to April to May, and then this year when we went with 400 or 500 kids out of the building at one point, day after day of here's a worksheet just becomes nonsense, right? And so learning how to use that inquiry based all the time, not as an occasional piece, but consistently, really has helped our instruction for kids who aren't in the building right now and kids who are.
We've also been given an advisory period as well, which gives us a block of time that we can do with either homework recovery or do some extra PBLs. So I really like that. I really hope that stays. I'd like to turn that into like a STEM time, PBL time for those students who have their homework all caught up and their grades are fine.
Is that every day, Andy, or like once a week, or?
Every day.
That's awesome.
We have like 35 to 45 minutes every single day.
That's really cool. Do you know about Genius Hour? Because that would also be a cool way to use that.
I don't know anything about that, but.
Well, similarly to PBL in that it's very student driven, but it's also called passion projects and 20% time. But basically kids get to pick a topic or a subject or a problem that they're passionate about. They do their own research. They create some type of presentation or product that will help solve this or educate other people about it. It's all stems from Google's 20% time, which they had years ago, where they would give their employees 20% of the work week to work on any project that they wanted. And the only caveat was that it had to benefit Google in some way. Like that's how Google Maps was created, Gmail came to be, all of those kind of really cool things came from people just having an idea and doing it. And so kids have done some really cool things too. So it's almost like an individual PBL.
It's one of Deb's passions, Andy. So talk to Deb about it when she doesn't have really bad feedback.
Right.
Oh, I know. I'm sure this is killing her that she cannot talk.
Me.
She's dying. I know she is.
100%. She loves the idea of Genius Hour and has been trying to like kick that around in various spaces in the middle school. So 100%, I know she would be your thought pal on that.
And I'm going to I'm putting a quick plug in for Tom's math on this. The very first time I ever saw Genius Hour implemented, it was about 6 years ago because it was right when I started consulting. But it was a 6th grade math teacher who wanted to give his students more time for independent, creative, and critical thinking. And so every single Wednesday for the entire year, he reserved the library, and he did that on purpose so that the media center person could be there to help him. And he also had a tech coach in there helping him. Not everybody has that benefit of having 2 extra adults, but his kids had to come up with their idea. They had to pitch it to a committee, which involved some district level admin, some building level admin, and of course him and the other 2 adults that he had helping. So they had to pitch it. Then they had to do the research, and he had a lot of structures in place, like your research has to be completed by here. And they had a innovation night, kind of like a science fair. And his students had to 3D print something that represented their project. And so when people stopped at their booth, They had that as the visual, and they had to give this 30-second elevator pitch about their Genius Hour project. And then they ended up, their final project or product was a TED Talk. And they actually had it registered with TEDx and all of that kind of stuff. It was really cool and very elaborate, but he didn't put anything in place that there had to be any kind of math component. And when he was done, every single student had so many different math standards incorporated naturally into their projects. So it was kind of a cool little, like, he didn't have to explicitly teach it for them to learn it kind of thing. Because of time, I'm going to go ahead and skip over back to the slide deck, but I want to keep that Jamboard going. And Lynn, feel free to offer to the high school teachers that didn't get to be here this morning that they can add their own thoughts to the Jamboard as well. But I want to talk just a couple minutes about what's coming next for us. So you also have the opportunity, we'll be doing 2 more of these early morning sessions, but I also want to offer coaching opportunities in between. So most of what I do is job embedded coaching with teachers, and we can do it one-on-one, or if you want to work with a PLC, then I'm happy to coordinate that with a small group as well. But the coaching cycle, this is actually, I stole this from Google's certified coaching method just because I like their model. But it's the same thing that we at Advanced Learning Partnerships have been doing for years as well. So as a coach, I help you identify whatever challenge it is that you want to focus on. We investigate possible solutions to that challenge. We select what that's going to be. So that's basically like we're co-writing a lesson plan together, or if you guys like working more independently, you can do that, and I can just give you feedback on that. And then the implementation is where you're going to be implementing whatever that strategy or lesson plan was that we co-constructed or you constructed and I gave feedback. And that can look a couple different ways. I can co-teach, I can model something for you, or I can just be that extra set of eyes and just kind of sit back and observe the lesson and give you feedback on what I saw happening. And then we'll come together for a period of reflection and debriefing together. So you'll actually have 3 opportunities for a coaching session. You can have as many as you want. Like you could have just 1, or you could have all 3 if you would like to. And I went ahead and put that into a little timeline for you. So today's our little kickoff. So that's what this our design kind of strand is this morning. And on March 31st, you'll have the opportunity to sign up for those coaching sessions with me. And then on April 21st, we'll have another early morning one like this, but then also coaching sessions that you can sign up for during that day. And then our 3rd coaching session would be available on May 5th, not Mary 5. I'm not sure. Sorry about that. And so on May 5th will be that. And then on May 12th, we'll all come together again on a Wednesday morning at 7:10 to reflect, amplify, and kind of plan next steps for the beginning of next year. So that was a super abridged version of what coaching is. Do you guys have questions about what that process could or might look like?
So there's a Google form to sign up, kind of what time on those days people
Yes.
want to work with you, and if they want to work alone with you or work with a PLC, right?
Absolutely. So also on your agenda, if you go down to this form, so your basic like logistical information, what kind of coaching do you prefer? So if you pick one-on-one, it's going to take you to a different section. If you pick PLC, it'll take you to a different section. If you pick none at this time, it's just done. And actually, if you don't want any kind of coaching, you probably don't even have to fill out this form. I'm just kind of thinking through that as I talk to you about it. So anyway, if you clicked like one-on-one coaching, oh, it's making me fill it all out. Anyway, it'll take you to times that you prefer. And so you'll just kind of fill all that out, and then I will do some logic puzzle work to get that all worked out so that we can get those scheduled on those 3 days. Questions? Okay, if you end up having questions after today, you absolutely can email me. These are all the possible ways to connect on Twitter. This is my individual personal Twitter. And then ALP has an account, a hashtag, and then we work in partnership with Dell. So that's Dell's account as well. You can also contact me through these other methods. You've got my cell number. Feel free to text me if that's easier as well. But if you have questions in between now and then next time we meet, feel free to reach out. Ooh, I just feel like we had a speed dating opportunity here this morning. I'm going to stop sharing. We even finished 7 minutes early, but that gives you time to fill out that form if you want to. You can also add more thoughts to the Jamboard. That is not going to go away as a place to capture some stuff too. If you don't have more questions, you can feel free to have an extra time to go grab another coffee or whatever you need to do before kiddos walk in. But I want to thank you so much for giving some time before school this morning.